Hey guys, thanks for checking out my channel and clicking on my face. I'm John Stark from MacTheMovieGuy.com, and this is a review of Where The Crawdads Sing. Yeah, I'm getting this done. It has audio description on Netflix. I'm a blind film critic, so I usually review films that have audio description. You may be asking yourself, or asking me, John, this one's been out for a while. Why did you wait so long? I was finishing reading the book. I was reading the book. And it took me a while. I was actually trying to read the book, back when the film came out in theaters. I was like, oh, I got time for it to come out on home. And I thought I read faster, and I didn't have time. So I needed to get through the book first, which kind of isn't a great idea, because now my opinion is that of someone who read the book. And as we all know, the movie is never the book. Sometimes it's fine though. And actually sometimes the movie is the book. I always point towards The Fault in Our Stars, which is really a great adaptation of that book. I've read the book and I saw the movie after reading the book, and that was really as close as you can get to just being right off the page and onto film, as it were. So here, no, this is like the Cliff Notes version of the book. It moves really fast. For anybody who watched it and is in the same page as me, books, and checked out the book first, you'll notice that they make a lot of choices with the film that they do differently in the book. One of those is something I can understand, and this is I'm okay with. At first I was like, oh my god, they're moving so quickly, like we're halfway through the book. But in the book, the time shifting happens a lot more between the two time periods, between seeing young Kaya, played by Daisy Edgar-Jones, at a certain point. I mean, at a certain point it's played by Daisy Edgar-Jones, at another point it's played by a younger actress when they need her to be really small. We see sort of like her story of her growing up in the marsh and all of that. But then we also see this other story, which is the murder. Chase's dead body. Nobody knows what happened. And they're trying to build this case. And it's far more interesting to see that over the course of time than it was to see it play out over the course of the trial. I will say that. I mean, I get why they did it rapidly, but when I have to choose between seeing the detectives actually go around and piece things together, and actually like coming back, versus them laying it all out during the trial scene, which gave David Strathairn's character, who doesn't appear until 2/3 of the way into the book, at least, he felt way more like a lead character, because he ended up having to do more heavy lifting because of how the film decided to edit itself, as he defends Kaya from the murder charges. I haven't even explained what the film is about, but I'm just talking about it. So anyway, none of this is really spoilers. This is just kind of either stuff that happens in the first part, like the beginning of the film that sets up the film, or it happens it just is what the film is. It just describes. The interesting part of the film is this life, right? I think the reason why, we have so many murder mysteries out there, that I think what drew people into Where the Crawdads Sing was the marsh life. This girl living out there on her own in the marsh, basically on her own. For a while, she's been left by all of her older siblings. Her mom left. She's very upset about that and talks about it frequently in the book. In the film, they just kind of show it, and she's just kind of gone. but they do in the book, because in the film, because they have to do it very quickly, they do it, I would say, a little bit more harshly. The scene felt very just like, oh my God. Because they had to show years of systematic abuse in a matter of like 2 seconds. So instead of flashing back over and over to show, you know, how many times she had had domestic violence, sometimes they'll tell a story in the book and they'll flash back and they'll be like, hey, do you remember Easter? And then, oh, this is what happened. So instead of doing that, they just gave Garrett Dillahunt this one time where he just comes in, you know, guns blazing, and just beats the living hell out of her and causes her to leave. And then she's gone. And she's gone for like the entirety of the book anyway. So that's not really like a, you know, you didn't miss anything with the movie. But they do kind of flash back and tell more stories. It's all about like shaping Kaya's life in the book. Whereas the film is more about explaining why she didn't kill Chase, or the trial part, anyway. Feels very more To Kill a Mockingbird in the film version than it does in the book version. Feels very much more like suddenly David Strathairn became the lead of the film, and he's this small town lawyer that is trying to get his client off. Then the book actually would want you to believe. The book is more about marsh life and love, and this little girl who is incredibly bright and knows a lot of things about stuff nobody would really care about. She knows all of these different things about the marsh and the creatures, and she learns it all just from picking it up, from watching it. And it's very interesting in that regard. And her relationship with Tate, that grows and builds, that was, you know, I mean, an abbreviated version in the film, I guess, as was her relationship with her pa, who she ends up being the only woman with pa, played by Garrett Dillahunt. And yeah, what you miss there is you do kind of miss the dynamic. You know, sometimes in the film she's scared, sometimes he gives her like a piece of advice, but you know, and it does dive a little bit into how she has to fend for herself, and come up with ways to get money to buy food at a young age, because her dad frequently goes off and just doesn't come back for days or weeks or however long. And if she doesn't have his money from his, he was injured in the war, if she doesn't have that, then she has no money to buy anything, to buy food. So, so she has to find a way to make money as the little kid. She's not going to school, and it deals with the whole you know, truancy officer thing. That's in both the book and the film, so that was good. It's not a huge part, but it is nice to answer that question for the audience, because I'm sure people are like, does nobody care about marsh people? Do they just have to go to school? It's like, no, they tried. So there's some stuff there, but it's all just very abbreviated. It felt very just like, here's this, here's this, there's this, and there wasn't any just sort of the execution was very sloppy. It was just sort of rushing through. It felt like somebody had told the director she would adapt the film in under 2 hours, and that was it. You know, you only have 2 hours. This film cannot be longer than 2 hours. And they're just like, what? And yeah, so it just kind of runs through that. It oddly puts things in other places where things don't need to be. It does change some things. I was watching this with my mom, and there's the scene where she goes in and offers, she's trying to figure out to make sure that she owns her property, And she asks, and that whole conversation happens in the book, but it's not, it's so much cheaper in the book. In the film, I don't know, I guess when they said it out loud, everybody was like, that's not a lot of money. I was like, I mean, first of all, the time period, so it's a lot of money for the time period. When you exponentially increase the amount of money to what they increased it to, thinking also, again, this is like 1967, so it's even more money. You've just increased like inflation. The amount that he quotes her would be a lot by today's standards. Anyway, it would be on the lower end of a lot, but I mean, it would be like, oh, I have to, oh, okay. But back then, it would be like, it's insane. And that was not the amount that she's quoted in the book. So that was fun. It just made it harder for her. And she also was ready for it. They changed up the order of her going in for that, and also her ability to acquire money. I'm also trying not to spoil things, and explain why I did or didn't like the film. They also reversed the order, so they made it look like she was doing this whole thing just so that she could get this property, but that's not actually the case. So, it's okay. My biggest problem are the performances. David Strathairn was fine, and David Strathairn's little country accent, for somebody who is sort of elevated, it's not really even a country accent. It needs to be rural. I would say rural accent. For somebody who is higher up and has been educated and is a lawyer, I felt like that was kind of an appropriate accent, but they have a lot of people in here who barely have any sort of an accent at all, and you can tell, and their speech patterns, the way that they're written. Kaya in the book doesn't speak, actually none of them do. They all speak kind of rural and kind of country and somewhat uneducated. Tate in the beginning is, I mean, and then he goes away to college, so there's even there's sort of a shift in Tate's character. They wouldn't necessarily have these polished, their accents are almost gone. It's like nobody cared enough to teach them how to do a rural Carolina accent. They're from a small town. This is the 1960s. It's at a time when, a lot of these towns were populated by people who had lived there for generations. They hadn't really come and gone from anywhere. There weren't a lot of people from other places. So it's not like they were importing people who had accents from other, to kind of mess it up. And yet their accents are barely there. And I guess that's what happens when you cast British actors and you're trying to get them to get that accent in there. But I wanted a little bit more Winter's Bone than I got. Daisy Edgar-Jones in this is just like way too polished to be Kaya at certain points in the thing. Kaya is beautiful, but she's a mess. Yes, she can read and she's definitely intelligent, but at the same time, she also barely speaks to anybody. She only talks to a couple people ever. So her communication skills and the fact that they have her narrating her own story in the movie, just that she has to talk that much more, just the whole thing kind of threw me off. I didn't like her performance. I thought it was poorly directed. I don't even necessarily blame her for the performance. I think the directorial choice of trying to elevate her to everyone else and have her speak like everyone else was just not a great choice. Chase is not that bright. He speaks really well himself, and I mean his he's one of those. Such a small town that the first thing that they remember him for is the fact that he used to be a great quarterback for the high school football team. That's his achievement in life. And he's not a high school student anymore. He like he's gotten married and manages a Western Auto. And the cops, the first thing they're like, oh, he was one of the best quarterbacks this town ever had. You know, and that's how this town is. So you have to embrace it. And I don't think that culture was embraced at all. I think they just kind of cast some people and threw it in and then did a Cliff Notes version of the film. So when I say I've read the book and I saw the movie, it kind of is just, yeah, it's, I can actually tell you why I, like, structurally don't think the movie works. Like, I think even if I hadn't read the book, I wouldn't like the movie because I would be asking myself these questions. Not all of them, necessarily. I wouldn't know about the time shifting and stuff like that, and certain changes that they made in the plot, but I would notice the performances. I would notice that there's this Marsh girl that supposedly grew up and never went to school and didn't talk to anybody and just sort of stayed away from everybody. And I know that the part of the point is that she's supposed to be as intelligent as them, but she wouldn't necessarily sound the same as everybody in that town, and not everybody in that town would sound the same. So, because very few people from that town are actually going away and getting educated and coming back. So, you know, David Strathairn's character would have the best chance of sounding the least rural. But some of these other characters, there was no real thought given to any of that. I think it was probably made, if I had to guess, I'm gonna guess it was made by a non-American director who doesn't think about things like that. So, that is my guess. So, yeah, I'm not really a fan. I'm willing to concede the fact that half of that could be because I read the book. So my grading here is just gonna kind of slide right through the middle. The audio description on this was fine. It describes, it does a good job of describing the marsh and the characters, and there's a lot of focus put on Kaya's beauty by the men who covet her, and that's in there. There's some stuff that they took out of the book, so it's not described. I had to ask the sighted person who was with me, because they never described certain things, like Jodie's scar was just apparently left out of the film altogether. So that's why they didn't describe it. So, I mean, there are certain things that, yeah, just didn't make a cut. Like Kaya's cabin, home, whatever, is, you know, she collects all these shells and these feathers and everything. So there's a lot of detail that has to go into describing that. And she does that sort of throughout the course of the whole film. She's always collecting a feather or a shell or some sort of insect or whatever that she thinks is beautiful and is studying, and to capture that beauty and then to put it from Kaya's eyes, because from just some random person wandering into her place, it just looks like a shit ton of shells and feathers and dead insects. But she, in the book, tried to make it so it was beautiful, and she used it as sort of art. It's a weird reference, but it's sort of like Man of the House. The Farrah Fawcett and Jonathan Taylor Thomas Chevy Chase movie. They had the wall of things that they found on the beach, and they kept trying to add things to it, and to some people it would look like junk, but to them it looked like art. You know what? When you've seen a lot of movies, random movies come up. So, that's what I got for you today. Man of the House, 1995 Jonathan Taylor Thomas movie. I don't know why it popped up in my head, but it did. So it was kind of like that. So yes, the audio description, without that, you would not know necessarily to the extent of what she does with this stuff and how important it is to her. So that's it. I'm going to give Where the Crawdads Sing a C. I don't feel like when I say C, I always use this as this is my get out of jail free card on recommending or not recommending it. I'm gonna let you decide for yourself. I'm gonna tap out on this one. I think Davis Strathairn was really good. I think there might be elements here that people might like because the original story to Crawdads Sing is really, it's a great story. That's why it's a bestseller. And it's possible that if you've never read the book, that doing a rapid speed version of the book may be just what the doctor ordered. But if you've read the book, I don't think you're gonna like the movie as much. Anyway, I'm interested to know from you guys if you did read the book and saw the movie, or if you didn't read the book and saw the movie, how did you feel about it? It's a movie that did okay at the box office, but considering, again, its biggest star, I think, is Davis Strathairn, I don't know that it was necessarily set up for $100 million. I mean, I know Daisy Edgar-Jones is a rising star, but I don't think anybody expects her to bank $100 million film right now. So the fact that it made as much money as it did was based solely off the power of how many people read the book. Anyway, please subscribe. I'm still trying to get to my year-end goal of 100. It's sad that I'm not there. It's sad how close I am, and I don't think I'm gonna make it. So subscribing would be nice. I have a website, macthemovieguy.com. You can follow me on Twitter at macthemovieguy. You can go to the audio description project, abp.acb.org. It'll let you know what has audio description and where you can watch it. And you can go to theadna.org, where you can look up your favorite films and television series and find out who is narrating them. That's it for me today. I will review something else and see you on the other side.